So welcome back to another edition of the Hart2Heart podcast. And my guest today is my good friend, Daniel Carcillo. So Dan is someone that you guys probably know. He's a two-time Stanley Cup winner. He's also the CEO of Suicidal Health. He's a big advocate in the fungi space. So Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Yeah, man, I'm very happy to have you here. It's been a while since we've seen one another.
Yeah. When was that? That was in London a little while ago with the Daniel Carcillo journey when I was doing that podcast. It was great to connect with you.
I think it was right before the COVID stuff happened, really.
Yeah, I was literally, that was the end of February, and I was on my way home, just out of Canada. And then, yeah, a bunch of the cases, that's when Chicago was shut down in March. And I was shaking hands and kissing babies on a February mental health speaking tour. So, but luckily, as you say so poignantly, taking care of your immune system is extremely important. And I was doing that. And, even when I got home about 2 months later, my wife had COVID. My kids were probably carrying it. My mother-in-law had it. Everybody around me had it. And I just didn't get affected by it.
That's awesome. And no scary stories in your circle?
My mother-in-law, you know, um, she got it bad. Yeah. But there's certain things that she doesn't do to take care of her health. So I think that we're putting a big emphasis on some of the supplements that I've been on for the last 2 years that just increase immunity and help the system fight off these types of viruses that are antibacterial, antiviral in nature. So luckily, a little bit of a scare, but everybody's no worse for wear and now on a better path. So.
Cool, man. Well, we're glad to hear that. Things didn't get too bad. Sorry to hear about your mother-in-law, but if she recovered, that's good news, and hopefully you can, teach her some stuff so that she does take better care of herself, so she doesn't get sick again.
Yeah.
But I know that was probably a good segue to kind of get into some of the immune modulating properties of mushrooms. But before we do that, Dan, there's a lot of I have a lot of patients, for example, who have really struggled with mental health. They've struggled with suicide. They've been on tons of different antidepressants, medications, and you're someone who was in a similar position at one point in your life, and you've kind of come out of it. I mean, when I mean kind of come out of it, I mean completely come out of it and reversed it to where you were better than you were previously. If you don't mind, can you kind of just give us the Cliff Notes version of your journey? And it doesn't have to be the Cliff Notes version. It can be the full version, because I think people probably do want to hear that.
Yeah. So it's an anomaly, being a professional athlete, everybody looking up to you on social media, you're the epitome of health, but I was the closest I ever was to dying a couple of times during my career. And that was attributed to what I was getting prescribed by these doctors. And then not understanding the, symptomology that can come about with repetitive head trauma, subconcussive and concussive hits, and not understanding how to treat that, and not understanding how to advocate for myself. And, I'm very grateful for my journey. And I say that now, like with a full heart. I am extremely grateful, because there's such an amazing opportunity that we have in front of us to be able to, shift how we view healthcare and how we view this individualized approach to making sure that Mike or Daniel gets the best treatment for the individual. So, I mean, it started like anybody else, like when I was 4 years old, and as soon as you can walk, you put skates on. And then I came up in the ranks. I played AA my whole life. And my last year, about to get drafted, you knew that you had to play AAA. So I moved up to AAA for 1 year, ended up getting drafted to the OHL in the 6th round, which isn't very high. and just worked my butt off, man. Realized that there was an opportunity there for me to change my life and get out of King City, which I love King City, but it's a town of 7,500 people. And I just saw an opportunity, and I wanted to grab it. And so I put everything that I had behind that mission when I was 16 and moved away from home. And there's so many things that happened that year that it was the best year of my life and the worst year of my life. There was a lot of hazing, there was a lot of bullying, there was a lot of sexual, physical, verbal abuse from, coaches, from players. The 13 rookies on that team, we endured a lot. But I ended up, achieving my dream. And I think a lot of that anger, frustration, and sadness fueled what everybody saw through the TV screen, which was Car Bomb, which was this guy who's just totally unhinged, on the ice. And as you know, Mike, hockey's an amazing outlet if you're angry.
Yeah, definitely.
So and I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that trauma was fueling me throughout my whole career until I found plant medicine and fungi 22 months ago, to kind of wake me up. And it's an amazing thing where we can put trauma, so I just operated off of the pretense that, rivalry night, and I was supposed to, take your will away, man, to be able to touch that puck. Like, we got taught the game a different way. And so that would start in warm up, and I'd make eye contact with you, and I would start chirping, and I would start trying to break you down and let you know you are in for a long night, my friend. And as soon as you hesitate, I get that puck and my whole bench sees it, and we go and we roll. And then when you're on the ice, you step on someone's throat, not literally, but these little things that we see from the bench and on the ice, these hesitations, is what really gives confidence to a team to just steamroll you. And so that started from the drop of a puck. That started from, when I was about 6, 7, 8, just learning the game. Just take your will away, man, slash the top of your feet, and just know that I'm coming every single shift. And that's the way we were taught the game. Now it's being taught differently. There's actually a scoreboard and skill that's being highlighted, which is amazing, just because I think we know a lot more about, the effects of repetitive head trauma. And so I'm glad that the game has shifted in that manner. Obviously, we're still animals, and we still like to see the hits, and we like to see the fights. And there's a part of me that's no different. My only hope is that now guys are more educated about those risks, and they can start protecting themselves by using CBD, the patented neuroprotectant by the US government. And so I, had a really long career in terms of being a pro. Turned pro at 19 as soon as I graduated high school, and played about a year and a half in the AHL. And started to, I was about 165 pounds soaking wet out of the OHL. I fought 4 times, which might be surprising to people. I scored 30 goals a year. And then I just added, I was always physical, right? But the guys in the OHL would back me up. And I didn't have to, because I was a goal scorer, fight. But I remember when I turned pro in the A, fought Kevin Cawley and knocked him out. And then Elaine Nazardine, our captain on Wilkes-Barre, was like, where did that come from? And I was like, well, to be honest, I have no idea. But I kind of got a name for myself. And then I realized pretty quickly that I could add that to my resume. So if I had that over everybody else, then maybe I would get called up, And so I used that to my advantage. The problem was you get a little bit pigeonholed into that role sometimes. But I always prided myself on being able to play. Being able to stick up for myself, being able to shift the momentum of a game, stick up for other teammates, sacrifice myself for the good of the team. Like, I was the epitome of a good soldier in that sense. And that worked for me from 20 to 25 until it didn't work anymore, because I was going out a lot. There were other things off the ice that I was trying to manage with substances that I was being prescribed by these doctors that I probably shouldn't have been on.
Can you get a little bit specific into those substances? Just because I know that some of my patients and stuff are probably, are probably using some of the same stuff. So it's just, they could probably relate to it a lot better, if you're just a little more specific. You don't have to, divulge anything personal that you don't want to, of course, but
no, it's all good.
You can.
I'm an open book, man. So there was points where I was on antidepressants, and then there were points where I was on opiates, a lot of opiates, and
During
you know,
your playing career.
during my playing
Yeah.
career, yeah, cortisol shots. This was at a point from 20 to 25 when it was between 2006 and 2011, where trainers were able to walk up and down the plane aisle and literally doll out whatever they wanted. So you didn't need a script. This was during that opiate crisis where there were
Yeah.
pill mills everywhere. And, some guys would ask for 4 Ambiens and get it. And, other guys would ask for muscle relaxants, opiates. It was pretty commonplace. And so it's kind of normal, and I didn't have my first painkiller till I was 21. I remember like it was yesterday. I blew my PCL out on the plane, and not on the plane, playing in San Jose. Jeremy Roenick, coward from behind, grabbed my neck.
He was my favorite player when I was growing up.
He's so lucky that I had respect for older players, because I should have beat the wheels off him and then I wouldn't have gotten hurt. But I went after somebody else, and skate got caught under somebody's leg, and he pulled me from behind while I was on my knees, and there goes my PCL. And I was having an amazing year. Probably would have broke Schultze's record for most PIMs in a year. Also had about 15, 16 goals, I think. And so I get back to the room, they do some tests and they realize that it's no PCL anymore. So you have your ACL that holds from, sliding forward, and PCL from sliding backwards. And so it's a pretty crucial ligament. And I went on the plane. I just remember being in a lot of pain. And then, like it was yesterday, they gave me an oxy, and I was in heaven. I was just numbed out everything, the pain, like the physical pain, but also like the emotional pain. I was like, oh my gosh, what is this? And so that started my romance with these painkillers,
And sorry, Dan, I don't mean to interrupt you, but like when you took that painkiller for the first time, like you were just expecting pain relief, right? Like you weren't expecting this like euphoria or like calmness and like anxiety relieving. Like you weren't expecting that. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I wasn't expecting it to take everything away, numb out everything. And still at that point, like still not realizing, not being fully aware, not being an adult, spiritually, to understand that it was, helping with, or not helping, but numbing out all of the emotional trauma. So it was, again, like just something that I was never educated on, or any of us really were, not realizing that it's, the equivalent to synthetic heroin. So, obviously I got a script of that from the doctor. And then, there were guys on my team that were asking me to get scripts of Ambien. I didn't use Ambien, but then, guys would double up on it, and I was a young guy. So, they'd ask me to get scripts, and then I'd give it to them, like it was just kind of a free for all back then. Pretty dangerous now thinking about it. But, so that was, pretty commonplace. And that kind of started this path of using these painkillers, maybe not in the most holistic way. And it's not the easiest to not abuse them. And so, but I was still performing, right? Like you're still, still performing at a high level, because it's a game, and I've been playing it since I was 4. So that's easy for me. And
this is when you were with the Flyers, right? Mostly.
No, this is when I was with Phoenix, with the Coyotes. Okay. Yeah, the first 2.5 years was with the Coyotes, and then I went to Philly, and things came to a head in Phoenix. I got enough leash to hang myself a few times, and then they just kind of had enough. And so then I ended up going to Philly, and that's really where the car bomb came out. And that's really where I solidified myself. And I just couldn't wait they were my favorite team growing up, and learned a lot from them, and Don Cherry Rock'em Sock'em videos. And so it was amazing to play in a place that now, was really passionate about hockey, because I played the game very, very on the edge, very emotional, no studying, no anything like that. Systems just came naturally to me, instincts on the puck, and just raw emotion. And, so we found some success early on in Philly and hockey wise. And, but again, this constant battle with the alcohol, with the things that were being overprescribed, and things that we were really like undereducated on. And then, it kind of came to a head at 25. I kind of saw the writing on the wall where I was getting injured a lot. My body was breaking down, and I knew that I needed to change the way I was thinking about life, living life, and isolating from family members, and these sorts of things. And, it was either I would continue to be in institutions, I would probably die, or I'd get better. There's three choices. So I decided to ask for help. I realized that my career was almost going to be over. And if I didn't change the path that I was on, it would most definitely be over. And even worse, I might not be here. And so I reached out, asked for help, got the help, and went to Malibu for the first time in the canyon, which is no longer there. It got burnt in those fires. But that was just an amazing wake-up call. I was able to, dive into who I was as a person, and really start scratching the surface, peeling back the onion as far as why I acted certain ways towards certain people and towards myself, why I viewed myself in a certain manner, why I acted in certain manners. I got introduced to meditation, spirituality, good diet, all of these things that were such an anomaly in my community then in hockey.
And that was at sorry, I'm not really familiar with this place. So it's Malibu, and
it's called the Canyon. So it's a rehab. It's a rehab facility. And I chose to go there.
And can you sort of just walk us through like a little bit of how what happened when on your first day, when you were there, how did they introduce you to meditation, nutrition, all this type of stuff? And when you went in there, were you the car bomb that we envisioned with Laviolette, kind of trying to calm you down on the bench? What exactly did that sort of look like when you kind of stepped in?
The car bomb that went there was a shell of himself, close to death. Just needing something else, man. I needed something else. And relationships were falling apart away from hockey and with hockey as well, and so I went in there. I remember I weaned myself off of opiates, and I went in there, and everybody's kind of, rehabs are rehabs, right? Some rehabs sell rehab, and then this place, though, thank gosh, man, it was so amazing. It changed my life completely. The therapists that were there, just the right time, and I went in there not on any drugs, to everybody's surprise. They're like, do you need Suboxone? Do you need this? Do you need that? And I didn't. I just needed work. I needed to understand why I was acting the way I was acting.
And what year was it, Dan? Sorry.
So that was 2011.
Okay, so right after
that
Stanley
cup run.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
With Philly. Obviously,
Philly.
A lot of people know that you won the cups with Chicago after, but you're actually playing with Philly, ironically, against Chicago in 2010.
Yeah, and that's kind of how Chicago saw me. It wasn't directly after that; it was the season after. So 2011, 2012.
Okay.
It was the summer, and I was just like, I needed help, and I gave the docs a call, and I kind of, told them what I was doing from the substance abuse program, and just said, I need to go somewhere, and so they were gracious enough to set that up, and it changed my life, man. It was so amazing, to just understand who I was as a person, and understand that that's really where I started to understand that I was Daniel who played hockey and not the hockey player named Daniel. And so I started to separate those two things out, and I started to fight differently. I actually, cared about my teammates, and I started to change my relationships away from the rink and with my family and friends. I started to learn about meditation, not having to use substances to de-escalate from a game, because it's really hard to go home after 4 hours of playing in front of 21,000 screaming fans and then just expect to eat dinner and go to bed. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So like started to use these different techniques, breathing techniques and exercises coupled with, the proper supplementation, to get back, to get rest. And so I stayed sober for, probably like 2.5 years after that. And really, went to AA, did all the classic things. But what I started to realize is that I dealt with my trauma. So I didn't need to use substances in the same manner. And I found myself just like white knuckling a lot of things, like I think a lot of addicts who are dubbed addicts do.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to experiment, so my sponsor's like, well, if you don't think you are, then go out and do some more research. So I started to do that. And to my surprise, I started to be able to control everything around me. And because I dealt with who I was as a person and some of these traumas that came up. Now, 2.5 years in, it's a lot easier said than done, but like that's when I went to Chicago a year after, right, this rehab. And that's when I met Steve Monador. And I'm telling you, man, the universe works in really mysterious ways, because they put me and Steve together. And he showed me how to live like this happy, healthy, fulfilling life. Like here's a guy who was just like a good looking dude, tattoos, cool, charisma, put him in any situation, man. And he was just somebody you were attracted to, you wanted to be around his energy. And we really hit it off, and I really credit him to helping me. There's one thing to get better in a rehab, and then there's one thing to transfer that into your everyday life. And then I became a really good teammate, a better teammate, and started to really care about guys, and started to be the guy that everyone kind of looked to like concerts and restaurants and events in Chicago, because hockey players are very tunnel vision, and focused singularly on one goal, which you do have to be. But, I found my personality, and I wanted to go and explore the city. And so I started, a radio show at WGN, and started to talk about music and my interests, and started to just expand. And it was good years, a good 5 years, like Drake says, and I've said it to you before. I think we said it on the other podcast. If you live the right way, your luck's a sure thing. And I went to the Stanley Cup finals 4 times with 3 different teams in my last 5 years. And nobody in the history of the NHL has ever done that. And I'm not special. I'm not Hossa. I'm not a superstar. But I really,
for a little bit. They had
yeah, no doubt. I played with him and Kane for a bit, and that was in a tribute. I attribute that to like getting healthy, and having my mind right, and so, in those last 5 years, it was, a lot of good times, and then towards the end, seeing what Steve went through, and then starting to read up about, around 2013, the NFL concussion lawsuit, starting to feel these symptoms towards the end of my career after being sober for 2.5 years. It really puts you present, in your body. And I started to just feel off. At that point, I had 5 concussions, and I got my 6th in 2014 from a fight. And then I got prescribed more opiates. So it's just this vicious cycle. And I was just at that point, like not really understanding these symptoms, and a little bit weak to be able to say no. And then I saw, Steve get cleared for 4 concussions in 12 weeks by the Blackhawks. And, It's like, then he was suffering for a good year and a half when he retired. And I didn't really know what to say to him. So I started to, make a call to arms and did a Players Tribune video. And then my last year, my son was born. So this is 2014, 15. And so I had like one foot out the door, and then Steve passed away in February of 2015. And I remember, getting the news in the locker room right before, like just about to go tie my skates, and my phone kept ringing and ringing and ringing and ringing. And I was already worried about him, he didn't have any help. And I just knew something was up. And then when I saw who was calling, I was like, oh man. And then I got the news, and I still had a job to do, so I tried to ignore it and go in the room, but I looked over at his stall when I was tying my skates, the stall he used to, and I just started breaking down crying. And then Johnny pulled me aside. He's like, what's going on, man?
Jonathan Taves?
Yeah. And, I told him, and, you don't want to be a distraction, to the room. Like, so you try to just fucking what I learned, like suck it up and go do your job. And so I went out, got myself together, and went out to warm up. And then I was, did a few laps around, and my head wasn't in it. And then I saw a jersey, one of his jerseys, and I just started bawling, in an NHL warm up. And I just got off the ice, and I walked down the tunnel 5 minutes into warm up, and I walked into Q's office, and he said that he just heard.
Q, for people, is the Quinville, is the coach.
Coach Quinville, yeah. And then I just said, I'm done, man. I can't do it anymore. I'm spiritually, mentally done. And then he understood, and so then I took some time at home to just be at home and be with my son, my fiance at the time. But then eventually, you got to come back. Like, you have a job to do. And so I came back, but I wasn't there. I just wanted to kind of go through the motions, and I tried to just be a really good teammate. They said that they wouldn't play me again, but then we had a game in Philly, and we already made the playoffs. So I'm that type of person that I think, or player that they knew they weren't going to use. And so you don't want anyone to get hurt, right? We already had a playoff position, so they threw me in. And I remember the first period was just like the puck was following me around. I was out of shape, like probably 10 pounds overweight. Shouldn't have had a good period. And it was just like one of the better periods, of my career. And the puck wouldn't leave me alone. And I'm like, fuck, I'm like, Steve's definitely here. I remember crying in the first intermission, just breaking down, just like, cause I felt them, and then I went back out in the second. I'm just like, I want to feel something else. So I got into a fight, and I let Bellemare just hit me. I just wanted to feel something else. And this speaks to the mentality that I was in at the time. And I just didn't want to feel sad. And so, and then I got my 7th concussion from that fight. I remember my father-in-law was there with a bunch of waste management business guys, and I came out and I had a big, welt, and I wasn't myself. And I went back to the bus, and I couldn't look at my phone for about 2 weeks. And I got home, and I wanted nothing to do with my son, who was a newborn. It wasn't normal. And I started to have a lot of anxiety and depression. And then I started to think pretty seriously about suicide and just these thoughts that I knew weren't normal, and thank gosh I was still grounded enough to understand that they weren't, and then I just made a decision then and there that I was done. And then I ended up I went back to the room, and I just tried to be a really good teammate. I was able to help guys like, I think like Versteeg and Timonen through the playoff run. We ended up winning the 2nd Stanley Cup, but like these guys were scratched, had never been scratched before. So like my job was just to be there as, play Backstreet Boys and dance in the morning and like have fun and try to get them through, like try to get them to understand that they're going to go back. Like, you're still a crucial part of this. It's just never been scratched on and off my whole career. So I just knew. So that was my role. And I did it, and we ended up winning. And then I remember I didn't go to any parties. I didn't want anything to do with the banner raising. I didn't go to that. I've said it several times. I could care less that my name's on that cup 2 times over. Doesn't mean much to me, man. What matters to me is the friendships that I still have with the guys. I think, just moving forward with what I think is right, which is holding people accountable, organizations accountable, and then trying to create as much as I can in the way of better, awareness, education for TBI, diagnostics, collecting data, and then, thank gosh, I found fungi. So like I retired in 2015, I walked away. And then, I started to right away, started to experience these symptoms, man: light sensitivity, slurred speech, headache, head pressure, insomnia, impulse control issues, anxiety, depression, headache, head pressure, problem solving issues, short-term, long-term memory loss. I started to deteriorate pretty quickly. I didn't have a purpose, right? So that was a pretty big issue. And I got pretty scared. So, I started to reach out to the PA and see what they had in the way of resources, which is nothing. And so I realized pretty quickly, man, I'm in this on my own, and you better figure it out, man, and you better figure it out for your family and for others too, and so started to go to the best CTE pathologists, brain banks, functional neurologists, doing neurofeedback, doing QEEGs, talking to PhD endocrinologists, supplementation, moxa acupuncture, self-deprivation tanks, TMS, hyperbaric chamber, meditation, again, getting back into the spirituality of it. And
that's a lot of different treatment modalities that you just named. But
oh yeah,
sometimes for people listening, sometimes you need that. People are sometimes looking for one thing. If I can do one, if I can just do this one thing, my life's going to be better and everything's going to be, so much better. And, there's some, truth to that with and you'll probably talk about your heroic dose experience of mushrooms now. And yeah, it can definitely be life changing, but for sure, you can't just rely on one treatment modality. And I think it's important for people to know that it's not Dan was sick and then Dan took mushrooms once and then Dan never did anything again. No. It's it's every single day you're checking in with yourself. You need to be self-aware and see how you're doing, and then to make treatments based upon that and based upon your symptomology. It's not just going to be one time you do a bunch of magic mushrooms and then everything's just going to be better for the rest of your life. It's every day you gotta work hard,
man. And that's what makes me so upset about this space. That's why I'm deciding to come public with my journey, and we'll get into it now. I know we only got about 15 left, but yeah, it's this is not a panacea. This is not a magic substance. Okay. No pun intended with the name of it. And so I went and did all these different modalities. And the first thing I did was started reading, right? PubMed papers. So started to understand concussion pathology, and then hopefully how I could fix it. Right. And every 6 months, I understand anecdotals are cool, or stories are cool, but you need to back it up with science. So every 6 months, with those modalities that I just listed out, that was available to us, where they say, these are going to stimulate brain regions shut down due to trauma. They're going to help build you new neurological pathways, and then you should be able to be better. I said, awesome, let's do it. And so then I tracked with QEEG and with blood work. Every 6 months, I would switch a modality. So I would switch maybe, try just eating a lot more omega-3s in combination with neurofeedback, in combination with hyperbaric chamber, for example. Test that. see if it moved the needle any, right? The only thing is, like with these clinics, number one, they're not covered by insurance because there's no validated TBI endpoints. So insurance doesn't cover many of these things. And they're expensive, a lot of this stuff. And so all the while I was advocating, right, for TBI survivors. But I didn't really move. I didn't get much movement with QEEGs and with blood work as I was doing these quote unquote like clinical evidence-based modalities. They still have their place, trust me, because the number one thing that we have to do for TBI survivors is provide hope. And getting off your butt and going to do something, no matter what that is, if it costs money or not, is providing hope. And that way we have something to look forward to, and we'll keep going, right? And so I talked about all these different things. And if you can't afford a $23 foot massage when you're really stressed, well, then grab a golf ball and roll out on your foot, so it's like a tiered approach as well. And I got to this point 22 months ago. So I started in 2015 and got to this point about 4 years in, and I took my 8th QEEG and then my 8th blood workup, and still all red, and at that point, my relationships were so tattered with my family. At that point, I had 3 young kids under the age of 6. Me and my wife were at ends. I wasn't talking to nobody, right? I was isolating, major depression, anxiety, and I started to get hopeless. And so 22 months ago, I spent about 3 weeks making some pretty significant plans to unburden everybody around me and take my own life. And the number one cause of death after TBI is suicide. And when people lose hope, that's when I think that really creeps in combination with like self-deprivation or sleep deprivation. And those were real things. But I also knew, again, thank gosh, I don't know why, there was always this thought in the back of my mind, this isn't normal. Like I still think you could figure this out, man. Like you have a car, you have a beautiful, healthy family, you have a roof over your head. You should not be wanting to do this. And then an intervention, a former teammate reached out and said, hey man, try to come to this farm and start learning about like CBD and functional mushrooms. And then I was surprised that day with something that saved my life.
Yeah.
It
Could we
was
who the teammate was? You don't have to
yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was Riley Cote. Played with him in Philly. And just introduced me to a hero dose of psilocybin. And it was the most difficult 3 hours of my life by far. But the reason you take that size of a dose and you do it in the right set and setting. So set is the intention. The setting was with a experienced guide, and the dosage was right because he was experienced. When you manage those 3 things, and I was just prepared, man. I was ready to die. So I was ready to surrender. And that's one of the keys when you take medicine and you work with medicine on at a big level. You just have to prepare to surrender. And even though I was prepared to do that, it was still extremely difficult. And then all these past traumas came up: the sexual abuse, the physical, the trauma to my head, where I was in life, no purpose, lost, all of these things. And I was able to be effectively, guided through this. And because of that, I ended up surrendering about 2.5, 3 hours in to this ceremony. But there's companies out there looking for a shut-off valve.
Yeah.
Oh man, it makes me laugh. Like there's no such thing, and we shouldn't be looking at that. We should be looking at just getting more information about Daniel, and then just managing the setting maybe a little bit more effectively. And then so I woke up the next day. I described it as feeling the way I should. With TBI, I wanted to get back to this person I was before. I left home before I was 16 and started taking all these big hits, and 164 fights later. And I started to reach out to the people that I was isolating from immediately the next day. Calling my wife, couldn't wait to get home to my kids. and hug them and be with them. And then called my parents, and I called my brothers, and I called all my best friends, and it was amazing.
Did
My
you feel
negative.
too, Dan? Like I think find a lot of people when they do a big dose like that, like they almost feel like guilty in some ways for how they were acting. And like we associate guilt with like depression, but it's like a happy guilt. It's like, oh shit, I really, really needed that. It's,
Yeah, it
it,
was like, I mean, I don't know about, I think there's always guilt, right? When an addict comes home, and I wasn't an addict on opiates or alcohol, but I was caught in a very destructive thought, in a few destructive thought patterns, where I wanted to just punish myself, and because none of these treatments have worked, and I'd spent so much money, and I'd spent so much time away from my family, and I'm still not any better. And so there was guilt from a sense of, just trying to communicate how badly I felt for the way that I acted. But I also understood that I was sick. And I think that's a really big key. TBI survivors do not want to act the way that they act. Like we don't, a lot of people don't understand these symptoms, and we don't want to be like this. We don't want to isolate from our loved ones. Like, it's just these things that do happen because TBI takes over neurologically. There's cell death, so many physiological ailments like anxiety, depression that can come on. And then it attacks your central nervous system, like everything. Your hormones are out of whack because our pituitary gland sits in such a rigid part of our skull. There's just so
very
many
good point.
factors. There's so many factors. And I think the more that we educate, even like with WeSana, there's a really big component to educating the family unit, right? So that we can better support and that we can better understand this person is sick and they do not want to be this way. Even though they may have impulse control issues, that's a symptom of this sickness. And so, what I'm trying to show is thankfully we can get better. We can, like, I am by far the happiest, healthiest, highest producing version of myself, not just from a business sense and creatively, but from being a father and being a husband, like just really in tune and in the moment every time I'm with my kids and wife, and communication is better. And negative self-talk, where I used to beat myself up, is now positive reinforcement, which is such an anomaly for any pro athlete. So all of these shifts started to happen, right? And what's really amazing is I started to delve into the research. And then I realized pretty damn quickly that, wow, this can be the first novel validated care option for TBI survivors, right? That we can prove out through FDA and Health Canada trials. That journey, proved, I started to realize that after a year, right? So I went back home after the big dose. I understood concussion pathology, understood that I needed nothing gets fixed in 5 hours. I shifted perspective for sure of my world and of my recovery, which is super important. I stimulated brain regions shut down due to trauma. When you look at the two brains, psilocybin, placebo, that's what happens with the right and left brain's hemispheres communicating. I broke up destructive thought patterns, and I stimulated neuronal growth, right? All of those things are well validated through a lot of these early studies. And so on a big dose level, this can be so impactful for TBI survivors, right? But you also, like, what else? Like, there's a ton of damage that I did, right? So over a longer period of time, I knew nothing gets fixed in 5 hours. So I went home and I focused. I focused on sleep, focused on supplementation and nutrition. 3 things. Stopped everything else. Stopped all the clinic work. And again, I want to preface this with, this is not medical advice. This is just my experience, okay? And there's a lot of validation, evidence-based anyway, for some of these modalities, right? That can help. So people should not think that I'm talking down on them, but I just wanted to give this medicine its fair shot. And so 2 weeks after the big dose, started to just do the microdosing in combination with non-psychoactive cannabinoids, in combination with functional mushrooms like lion's mane, reishi, cordyceps, chaga, agarikon, turkey tail, maitake, shiitake, oyster mushroom. these sorts of things. And a pretty strict regimen. Started to read about Stamets and his protocol, and Fadiman and his protocol. I started getting connected to the community, Rick Doblin, MAPS, Decriminalized Nature, Carlos and Larry and those guys, and Dr. Bronner, and just really wanted to understand and started to do research. And I got to a point 3 months in where I probably could have tested, but I wanted to stay on my kind of protocol. And at 6 months, I retested my brain and my blood work. And for the first time in 5 years, I got a QEEG back with no abnormalities. So that meant that my brain was communicating properly. And when you dive into the raw data behind it, it's pretty remarkable, the shift that happened. And then I got my free testosterone test back, totally optimized, as well as my cortisol levels, which is the stress hormone.
And this is how long after you took the dose?
6 months.
6 months. Okay.
6 months after 2 big doses and a very strict microdosing protocol, and focusing on sleep and diet.
Okay. And that's, and then the clinical parameters that were improved were, you had more free testosterone, you had less cortisol, and then you also had structural imaging changes on your brain.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, man. It was.
And again, but again, like, it wouldn't happen if you didn't do the sleep, the supplementation,
no chance,
in your diet. And like, I know we only have a couple minutes left, but before we wrap things up, like, what was your diet like, just real quickly, before compared to after? Like, what did you?
It was still pretty good. Like, I understood like omega-3s. I understood to stay away from sugars. I understood to watch my alcohol intake, all of these things. Any type of neurodegenerative, any type of, non-organic food, I did not mess around with. So I kind of took that into this protocol. But just what's amazing is, the big dose wakes you up, and then the microdose helps you stay in those habits that you want to create. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes it a little bit easier to stay in these good habits, and to stay away from sugar. It's hard, man. Sugar is everywhere. Like, I'm with my kids. It's at eye level in every single freaking store, man. And they want, we can go, that's a whole nother rabbit hole about how they want us to eat that, and it's harder. It's actually harder to eat well. But it feels so good to be able to do that. 90% of our serotonin receptors are in our stomach, and the gut brain axis is extremely strong. And so I encourage people to look at that. So 6 months wasn't long enough for me to say anything publicly. I waited a year, retested, started to tweak with the protocols, started to tweak with the milligram amounts. And then the test came back a year after, looking even better than the 6 month. So again, to your point on my podcast, post-traumatic stress disorder, post-traumatic growth, and I'm still in it. My tests keep coming back better and better. And now I'm 22 months in. And we've been able to put together like a really amazing medical team, scientific advisory board, creating this professional alliance of sports leagues that are affected by TBI. We're going to be going public with We Sauna Health here in the first 3 weeks of May. And we are solely focused on traumatic brain injury and its associated symptoms, and taking the protocol that I've solidified with my own recovery journey, as well as, there's others around, in and around the communities that I work with, the veteran community, women of domestic violence, and then the athletic community that have used this, and putting that into action, and we've been lucky enough to raise funds to make sure that I'm not playing in a sandbox anymore, like I was with just the advocacy work on Twitter. And I really think that we have an amazing opportunity to change the world, to change the way that we look at traumatic brain injury in both the pre-acute and post-phase.
And where can people learn more about We Sauna Health, Dan?
So just, on my social media, or www.wesaunahealth.com. And there's going to be, a lot of press coming out here in the next couple of weeks, so people can just keep their eyes peeled. But one of our main missions is to leverage this professional alliance with professional sports leagues to get to the veteran community and get to the older age community from falls and car accidents and women of domestic violence, and just really advocate education, awareness on not only TBI, but then the symptoms that arise, which are mental illness symptoms that a lot of us deal with and a lot of us may be scared to admit, so.
And yeah, and just before, thanks again, Dan, for coming on and sharing all that story. I mean, I think that a lot of people, listening to this can probably relate to it. And you've probably opened up a lot of eyes to, using medicinal mushrooms. And again, not just the medicinal mushrooms, psilocybin, but also the functional, mushrooms. And I wish we had a little bit more time to chat about that today. Unfortunately, we don't. But just tell us again. I know you mentioned your social media, but maybe just throw out your handles so that people can find you online.
Yeah, Twitter, I'm at CarbonBoom13, and then Instagram at Daniel Carcillo 13. Both Twitter and Instagram at Wisana Health. And then it's it's been a pretty little remarkable journey, and I just feel grateful for people like you that get it, that understand. And I know we didn't touch too much upon like the actual medicine and then the work, but maybe we can do it again sometime soon.
Yeah, man. I think the last podcast we did was just about a year ago or just over, like we talked about. But we're gonna have to start doing them every 3 months or something like that, because I definitely wanted to chat with you a little bit more about more stuff today. But unfortunately, we're kind of at a time. So thanks again so much for coming on, Dan. It was awesome to see it and chat with you. And I bet everyone listening definitely appreciates it too. So thank you so much again. And like I said, we'll definitely do this again soon.
Awesome, man. Yeah, thanks, buddy.